Right, so this is how you want to mark out for the scabbard. So basically I've put the sword onto the leather, drawn around the blade, and then I've done some measurements for the folding over and the bit that you stitch. So for that you would add half the width of the blade on both sides. So that for me was 1 inch and 1/8. So you'd add that measurement on each side. That's what this is here, this dot here. And then you would add on 1/2 inch. It can vary between 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch depending on how thick the leather is. Because this is quite thick and I don't want this too tight, I'm going to add another 1/2 inch, and that is for the curve that goes round. And then lastly you add on 1/4 inch, and that will be for the stitching. And then mark it around the shape of the blade, and it is also about 1 1/4 inches longer. And hopefully you can see that all. And then we will fold this over and stitch all the way along so it's together, ready to wet form it flat so that the stitch line runs along the middle and makes it rigid. Right, so I've cut it out. I've also took most of the marks off, and now I'm going to glue this together pretty much just by folding it over. If you struggle to get it to fold properly, if you wet along the middle, it should fold a bit easier. So there's various different glues. Super glue will work, but sometimes because this is quite porous it's not ideal. You get proper glue. I'm just going to use wood glue. It'll be fine for this. Just going to glue up this edge, fold it over, and then clamp it all down with some pegs. Right, so you just want the glue on the very edge really, about 5mm. Doesn't matter if it goes over a bit, because it will sort of open back up against the stretch. It will open back up when it's flattened down anyway. This is just to hold it while you glue it. Right, so I'll get this all together. It's going to take a bit of messing around. And then when I come back, this edge should all be glued and ready to sew. Right, so we have the edge glued down, as you can see. What we need to do now is sew all the way along that edge. So the way I do it, there's multiple ways you could do this, but you want to mark a line probably about, I don't know, 3mm down. Also, I have made sure that this edge is completely level, so that each side, because I had like a bit here and a bit up the top where one side was sticking up, you want it level so that when you stitch through, you're not accidentally stitching through like through this side, but that side was too low, if you know what I mean. I'm going to draw a line about, I don't know, 3mm down approximately. This is just a guide, this line, not really that important, it's just so you know where you're drilling essentially. So again, various methods to do this, but I've put a line all the way along. Then you want to mark your stitches. Now you can get a, I think they're called stitching forks, I can never remember. This is what I made at home myself with a spade drill bit. I just cut the teeth into it, the tines. What this helps do is mark where the stitches will be in a uniform distance. But you can always just get a tape measure and measure. So these ones are probably about 6mm apart, so reasonably wide stitches, but you don't need tight stitches. It takes a lot longer to do. I actually prefer this over the ones that I bought, because I find these are the ideal distance. So you want to mark this onto the sheath. So as I said, you can either just measure it with a tape measure every 6mm or whatever, and then we're going to mark these holes. Now this isn't to go right the way through, this is just to mark where they are so that we can drill through. One little tip I'll give you about drilling through: you want a drill bit about 2mm thick, or what I use, because my drill bit won't accept a small drill bit, I actually use a rivet. So I use a rivet as my drill bit and a piece of wood. That works fine. We'll get to that in a second. Right, so we've done the holes. Now we're just going to drill through those all the way through. One little tip I would give you is, because of the shape of this, you may want a little piece of wood under here, because if you're doing it like that, the drill holes may go out at an angle and they'll be in the middle here but not this side. So you're going to want to sort of prop it up with something just under that edge, or just lay it on the edge as you do it. But yeah, just be careful of that, because it can make the holes not equal. Right, so I'm just going to drill it now. And as I say, this is a very basic, this is easy to do. Right, so we've done the holes. I've got a reasonably big needle, not a massive one, and some heavy duty thread. This is the stuff I use. I can't remember if this is actually for sort of leather work, but you can buy stuff easy enough. And I have put it through the needle and basically doubled it over, and it's probably about getting on for 2 meters long. Now I won't get all the way down and back with this, so I will eventually have to start again. But I'm just going to sew in and out of the holes. I won't do saddle stitch. I'll just show you. So start at this end, just go through, pull the thread till you have a bit left. Now you can put them in a vise if it helps. I'm going to leave about that much to tie off. And then you go back through the next hole. And then the one next to it. And then what this will do, will leave a stitch pattern with a gap between it. So it'll be like that. You'll have a stitch and a gap, stitch and a gap. Go all the way down, and then you basically come all the way back. And as I mentioned, you probably won't get all the way down, so you will have to put the thread through a couple of times and then tie it off and then start again. But that's about all you can do, because you won't get a long enough piece of thread to do this in one go. So I shall carry on sewing, and then when we come back I'll show you it sewn and where we are then. With long items like this, you can put it in a vise and it will make it slightly easier. It enables you to tighten up the threads a bit easier then as well. Make sure they're nice and tight. And they will hold even without this end tied off. And the further you go, the more it will hold. Just be careful, because sometimes you can pull it too hard and pull it all out. You could just tie it off if you want to. but if you leave enough you can pull both sides, just to keep it tight for now. So I shall carry on all the way along. And back again. And you can see what I mean there by the gaps, and then you fill the gaps back in on the way back down. Right, so we've stitched all the way along, and I actually managed to stitch all the way down and back in one go. The length of the thread that I used was basically what I tend to do. I just hold the thread and I'll do 1 arm length, 2 arm lengths, and then a half an arm length, and that seemed to be enough for that. I don't tend to measure. Often I'll have way too much left over, but you can always keep that for smaller projects. So now that is stitched and it is nice and firm and, you know, sewn up, what we can do is now soak this in water. Now you don't have to soak it for long. I think it's only, I'll add an annotation because I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might only be for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to start wet forming it and basically squashing this down. It's a bit difficult when it's dry, but I'll try and show you. Squashing this down so that it's flat, but also the stitch line, the ridge, is smack bang in the middle. Now I have got a piece of wood somewhere. I've just found it. This is a piece of wood that I made just to help make that ridge sit in the middle. So you can basically insert the stitch line in that ridge and then flatten it down. So I'll get this soaked and then I'll start showing you the process. Right, so this has been soaked. It wasn't soaked for very long, a couple of minutes. You probably don't even need to do it for that long, and you can leave it sit for a little bit, maybe half an hour. So I'm now going to push this into these grooves and basically start flattening it down. And there's various ways you can do this. You can just push it with your hands or get a piece of wood, and this will help you sort of push down on the bits either side of the stitch line to get it to sit nicely, because that's what we're after, that. So you can then use a piece of wood to push down and sort of push the stitch line up against it. Keep this stitch line nice and straight, and it will take some doing because it is quite thick leather, so gradually keep going along, flattening it out, and then what we'll do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to clamp it in this jig. But yeah, this will take a while. It may help to put this on a table and kneel on it with all your weight. And it will take a while to get there, but once it has, these do look lovely. Right, so I have the sheath inside this sort of jig. It's the piece of wood that had the slit in it. I had to cut it slightly bigger to fit this in, and then I've just basically got 2 pieces of wood clamped either side. So this can now be left to dry, and then it will go solid like it is. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in between there or not. Let me turn my light on. But you can see it sitting flat in there. So yeah, the next stage will be just to let that dry now, and then we can finish it off by putting a chape and a collar on and dyeing it basically, and that's about it. And a little bit of tidying up, but yeah, you'll have the main shape of your sheath. I've also got a weed slasher inside it to make sure it's not clamped too tight. Yeah, so I'll see you in the next bit. Right, we're on another day now. This is the leather scabbard, nicely formed and dry. What I'm going to do now is put a chape and a collar on. So to do that, I'll be using this, I think it's 1.5mm or maybe 1mm. I think this is a bit of steel. It feels like, it might be aluminium, I can't remember now, but it's a nice silver bit of metal, so it will match the scabbard. So one piece, I'll just be cutting off a bit about that big for the collar, about 1 inch, and the rest of it will be for the chape. I won't bother showing you how to do, like, cut that bit out, but I'll show you how I measure for the chape. I've only ever done it 3 times, and I'm sort of, it's still trial and error how I do it, but I'll show you. Okay, as mentioned, this is still a bit of trial and error how I do this. But what I'm going to do, I'll probably cut off a little bit of the tip of this. Basically, what I'll do, this is the leftovers of what I'll have left after I cut for the collar. I get a piece of paper the same size, put it on, and then I sort of fold it over and shape it to how the metal would be folded. So this paper is really thin, it just cuts with this out. It's quite handy actually, it's just cutting with the pencil. Saves me a bit of pissing around. So that would be the shape for that bit, and then all we'd need to do is take off these corners, but you only need the basic shape for now. So that would be your basic shape with these corners cut off, and you'll require a bit of messing around to get it right, but you've got the basic idea there. And then this will be held on with a single rivet at the bottom here, and then the rest it just holds itself on around the scabbard. And as I mentioned, I'll probably chop off the little pointy bit of this. So I'm now going to mark this on here and cut those 2 bits out, and then I'll have the collar and the chape ready to go. Right, we'll see if we can bend this round now. This should bend okay, this stuff, because it is just thin aluminium, but you know, it also might not. Might be easier with the blade in. It'll make the scabbard slightly more rigid. Okay. Right. Get in there. So as you can see, I can do some of it with my hands. And this is the easiest way to do a chape, I think. I have tried doing a chape with, what do you call it now, soldering metal. I just couldn't get it to work, no matter what I did. So just take a little bit of messing around, but keep going round, hammering it about until it starts to sit in the right place. Getting there already, it doesn't take long. And you can take it off to hammer it if you want. That's easier. Okay. That's going to fit nicely. Right. So you see how that is. I'll be cutting off a bit of this, but I may cut, it depends, you can just cut it straight off, or you can cut a bit and fold it over. But basically we'll then drill a hole through and put a little rivet in. Right, so we've got the Chape on. That's what it looks like on that side. And for this method, I think this works really well. It requires no soldering or anything like that, no having a single capped piece. It will make your life so much easier, and it looks really good, I think. So what we'll do now is I just need to drill a hole through here into the sheath. Hopefully you can get it to come out the middle, and then you basically put a rivet on there, and then that'll hold the whole thing on. And you can pop it off and put a bit of glue under there if you like as well, but it doesn't really need it. And then what we'll do is take the bit for the collar, and that'll basically just wrap around the top, and we'll have a rivet here and here. I shall do this bit first though. Right, so I've got the rivet through. This is actually just a nail through the middle. I'm then going to put a washer on it and then pin that over. And then what you can do, just to finish this off, tidy it up a little bit, just to make it look better, you can glue some little bits of leather in there, just so it looks tidier. It doesn't affect anything, it just fills that gap up and you don't have the little gaps, which is what I'll do in a minute. So I'm just going to put this on a hard surface now, pin it over. Right, so there is the Chape on. Just need to tidy that up. That'll just mean maybe tapering that little bit what I've cut there and putting a little bit of leather in the end just to make it look better. I've bent the collar around. What we now need to do is make a hole there and there. And I recommend to do this you want a bit of scrap metal in there. Drill through, and you only want the holes to be there. They will hold it. These are a right bastard to do. I have no real tip to really tell you how to get these rivets in. But what you have to do is once you've drilled the hole, it'll take me too long to show you. You drill the hole, and then you can open this up and get the rivets in so they're sticking through. And then you're probably going to have to bend this out again and then bend it back round. So it takes a bit of doing, but it does look good once it's done. So I'm going to drill those holes, and when I come back the rivets will be in and they'll be done. Right, if we get back far enough you'll be able to see it. So there it is. That's that side. The rivets are hidden inside on that side, and that's the bottom. So it's just a little bit of clearing up now, tidying up. I'm going to go over the metal on the scabbard with a bit of wire wool because the whole thing is sort of a brushed metal effect. And then I just need to dye the leather. And to dye the leather you just need some leather dye and a sponge basically, or whatever you want to use. I use a sponge. And then I put some G-wax on, which is this stuff. You can get other stuff, but I think G-wax is great for leather. It's a soft wax, and people have said to me use beeswax. Beeswax is always way too hard for me. I can't. This stuff, even in freezing cold weather, it's freezing out here. You can see my breath. This is still soft, and it really gets into the leather really well. So I prefer using G-wax personally. So when you come back, this will be finished. I may show you myself dyeing it, but that's a very simple process. But yeah, just a case of finishing it off now. You've done the main work. Just tidying it up, making it look how you want to look. I may run one of those beveling things that takes the edge off of leather just on this bit. And you can wet that and rub it with a stick, a bit of wood, and that'll make that nice and smooth. But yeah, I've done the hard work. Let's finish it off. So when you come back, this should be finished, unless you see me dyeing it. Right, well here is the scabbard pretty much finished. I still need to tidy it up a little bit and just wax it. Yeah, I think that's looking good. Let's turn this light on so it looks like. If you can see it any better like that. But I'll show you some HD pictures at the end anyway, so you can see it all nice and polished up and that, because at the minute the leather's a little bit rough and patchy. But that'll look better when that's all polished up.